Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. So if you've never been here before, this is just a quick podcast to read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode and to give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times, so stick around. So if you remember last episode, we read Omni, the whole book of Omni, because this is the section of Book of Mormon that just has a lot of really tiny books in it. And it was basically 5 different writers, or approximately 5 different writers, handing down their record to their kids or to their brothers. And we hear just a lot of history happen in the last chapter, but also Amaleki, which is the last writer that has their hands on the record in the small plates of Nephi, had a lot of cool things to say. So go back if you haven't listened to that already. So for a bit of context, we're next reading the Words of Mormon, which is kind of the book that Mormon put in as he was abridging the plates. So the small plates of Nephi were everything that we've read so far. And following this book, we're going to be reading the large plates of Nephi. So the small plates of Nephi were really not abridged that much, but the large plates of Nephi were much more heavily abridged because they're so much longer of a record. There's so much more like just historical narrative in the large plates. So I'm very excited because it won't just be doctrine. It will be a lot more kind of narrative-y stuff, which is really fun because it feels like I'm reading you guys a book, which is great. So yeah, look forward to that. So yeah, I think without further ado, we read the Words of Mormon. And now I, Mormon, being about to deliver up the record which I have been making into the hands of my son Moroni, behold, I have witnessed almost all the destruction of my people, the Nephites. And it is many 100 years after the coming of Christ that I deliver these records into the hands of my son, and it supposeth me that he will witness the entire destruction of my people. But may God grant that he may survive them, that he may write somewhat concerning them, and somewhat concerning Christ, that perhaps some day it may profit them. So this is way separate from the chronology that we've been reading from so far. So basically with the Words of Mormon, we're jumping way forward in time to basically the end of the Book of Mormon, because this was written very much at the end and it was kind of placed in between the small and large plates. So it's kind of really cool to get a little bit of a peek into the history of how the people are thinking and feeling and what is happening so far into the future. I think 400 plus years after Christ has come. So this is hundreds of years in the future from the book that we just read. And I really love the Book of Moroni, which is at the very end of the Book of Mormon. It is so cool to get the perspectives of Mormon and Moroni, who were basically the final believers. And they have such a unique perspective, and they were in such an interesting situation. And so it's cool to get a little bit of a taste of that here in the Words of Mormon. So yeah. And now I speak somewhat concerning that which I have written. For after I had made an abridgment from the plates of Nephi down to the reign of this king Benjamin, of whom Amaleki spake, I searched among the records which had been delivered into my hands, and I found these plates, which contained the small account of the prophets, from Jacob down to the reign of this king Benjamin, and also many of the words of Nephi. And the things which are upon these plates pleasing me, because of the prophecies of the coming of Christ, and my father's knowing that many of them have been fulfilled. Yea, and I also know that as many things as have been prophesied concerning us down to this day have been fulfilled, and as many as go beyond this day must surely come to pass. Actually, this is really cool because Mormon is basically saying, okay, so I abridged a chunk of the large plates of Nephi, but then I dug through all the records that I had, and I found this small little record that had the words of Nephi and the words of different prophets all the way down to the reign of King Benjamin. Like, wow, this is cool. And so I put it in the Book of Mormon. So it's kind of cool to hear that he basically dug through the records that I had, which were supposedly really, really big, because he was given a lot of records from hundreds of years of people and was tasked with abridging it down to what it is today. And it's just so cool that he found this little, it was probably a pamphlet relative to all the thick records that he had, and he thought that it was so important and so poignant that he put it in the beginning of the Book of Mormon, which is so cool. But also it's cool because he's like, well, I was able to read these prophecies and a lot of them came to pass. He's like, a lot of the prophecies that are written in these plates have happened, and the ones that haven't happened yet, I know that they will happen. And that is such a perspective because he has an external perspective when he's reading these plates almost as much as we do, because he's looking at them from hundreds of years in the future, and we're looking at this from thousands of years in the future. And so it's kind of cool because I feel like I'm reading the Book of Mormon with Mormon as he's going through and abridging, because we both have the same, or at the very least a similar type of external perspective. Wherefore I choose these things to finish my record upon them, which remainder of my record I shall take from the plates of Nephi, and I cannot write the 100th part of the things of my people. But behold, I shall take these plates which contain these prophesyings and revelations, and put them with the remainder of my record, for they are choice unto me, and I know that they will be choice unto my brethren. And I do this for a wise purpose, for thus it whispereth me, according to the workings of the Spirit of the Lord which is in me. And now I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things which are to come, wherefore he worketh in me to do according to his will. And my prayer to God is concerning my brethren, that they may once again come to the knowledge of God, yea, the redemption of Christ, that they may once again be a delightsome people. And now I, Mormon, proceed to finish out my record, which I take from the plates of Nephi, and I make it according to the knowledge and the understanding which God has given me. I really like how in verse 6, he's like, well, I've decided to put the small plates of Nephi in the record because it is choice unto me. And he also knows that it will be choice unto his brethren. And I, personally, would describe the small plates of Nephi, which we have been reading up to this point, as choice. I would personally agree with him. But it's also cool to see how even Mormon, with the external perspective that he had, still did not fully know exactly why he was doing everything. Because in verse 7 and 8, he says, I do this for a wise purpose. And then later he says, I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things which are to come. He's like, I am being led by God because I don't know everything that's going to happen, but God does. And so he has told me to do certain things for the interest of people that are so far in the future that I can't even plan for that. It's kind of cool to see, even though Moroni was hundreds of years past all these records that he's abridging, he still doesn't know everything. And we, reading this record thousands of years after it happened, still don't know everything. So it's pretty cool that even Mormon has a little moment where he's like, yeah, God knows more than I do, and he's guiding me. Wherefore it came to pass that after Amaleki had delivered up these plates into the hands of King Benjamin, he took them and put them with the other plates, which contained records which had been handed down by the kings from generation to generation until the days of King Benjamin. And they were handed down from King Benjamin from generation to generation until they have fallen into my hands. And I, Mormon, pray to God that they may be preserved from this time henceforth. And I know that they will be preserved, for there are great things written upon them, out of which my people and their brethren shall be judged at the great and last day, according to the word of God which is written. And now concerning this King Benjamin, he had somewhat of contentions among his own people. And it came to pass also that the armies of the Lamanites came down out of the land of Nephi to battle against his people. But behold, King Benjamin gathered together his armies, and he did stand against them, and he did fight with the strength of his own arm, with the sword of Laban. And in the strength of the Lord they did contend against their enemies, until they had slain many thousands of the Lamanites. And it came to pass that they did contend against the Lamanites, until they had driven them out of all the lands of their inheritance. And it came to pass that after there had been false Christs, and their mouths had been shut, and they punished according to their crimes, and after there had been false prophets and false preachers and teachers among the people, and all these having been punished according to their crimes, and after there having been much contention and many dissensions away unto the Lamanites, behold, it came to pass that King Benjamin, with the assistance of the holy prophets who were among his people, for behold, King Benjamin was a holy man, and he did reign over his people in righteousness, and there were many holy men in the land, and they did speak the word of God with power and with authority, and they did use much sharpness because of the stiff-neckedness of the people. Wherefore, with the help of these, King Benjamin, by laboring with all the might of his body and the faculty of his whole soul, and also the prophets, did once more establish peace in the land. So, Mormon is basically like, well, the small plates of Nephi, I found them, and they're super cool, and I added them, and they're the best, and now we are starting from King Benjamin. So I'm going to give you a little bit of introduction on who King Benjamin is, and then we're going to read about it, you know? So it's very cool. He's giving like a little bit of a historical introduction, kind of hyping up the introduction of King Benjamin, because we're going to soon read about him. But it's very, very cool, because it says he fought with the Lamanites, not only in the front lines, not only was he a warrior king of sorts, not only did he fight with his people, and he didn't just lead them from afar, but he fought with a sword of Laban. Like, that's cool. That is as close as we get to an actual, like, Excalibur or something. Not that it has any special, abilities or what have you, but it's just cool. Like, we know the long history of this sword and the crazy things that it's done. And actually, fun fact, Joseph Smith dug up the sword of Laban with the rest of the records that he found, which is so cool. So the sword of Laban is, we hear all about how Nephi gets it, and then it's mentioned every once in a while how the kings just kind of use it, and then Joseph Smith unburies it in 1830. Like, wow. Obviously it's not magical, but it's kind of neat. But it's also cool. My favorite part in verse 18, which is the last verse, he says, King Benjamin, by laboring with all the might of his body and the faculty of his whole soul. So King Benjamin brought forth peace in the land, like that was what he achieved as a king, but he used it not only using the might of his body, but the faculties of his whole soul. And so he was a Renaissance man of sorts. He was not only strong and powerful and helped defend his people with the sword, but he also helped lead his people in the spirit. He was also a righteous man, and he worshipped God, and he had holy men and prophets among the people to help bolster their righteousness. And it's just so cool because he is everything. He's not just a preacher. He's not just a warrior. He is both. And it's so cool to see someone be both, you know? And so I'm very excited to start reading about King Benjamin, which we are going to when we start the Book of Mosiah next week. So, look forward to that. But for now, the standout verse from the Words of Mormon is going to be verse 7, which says, "And I do this for a wise purpose, for thus it whispereth me, according to the workings of the Spirit of the Lord which is in me. And now I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things which are to come, wherefore he worketh in me to do according to his will." So I just love this because Mormon is basically saying, well, I don't know what's happening, but I do know that God does, and I know that I'm doing what he wants me to do. Therefore, I am furthering his eternal goals on the earth. I'm being his hands, I'm being his instrument on the earth. And that is so cool. I feel like it takes a lot of humility to accept the fact that you are but a tool. You know, like you are not, this huge, important leader. He is a tool in the hands of God. He is an abridger. He is a writer. He is a compiler. It's kind of cool to see him acknowledge his place in God's plan, which, again, I feel like takes a lot of humility. So, yeah, I think that's the episode for today. Thank you so much for listening. I love having you around. So, there's just a few links in the show notes I want to tell you about. So, the first 3 are digital versions of the Book of Mormon. So, there's a web version, and there's 2 different app downloads, both of which are both for iOS and Android. So, if you want to read along and you don't have a copy, those are your options. You cannot hide from the Book of Mormon. Haha. There's also a quick let me know you learned link, and so if you want to, let me know you learned, and then golly, there's just there's a link down there to do it. How convenient. So you can send me a message of whatever you want to tell me down there. There's also a quick support the show link, so if you want to send me a few bucks, you can. It's available. And finally, we're on YouTube, so that final link is to the YouTube channel. So if you want to subscribe, you can. The podcast does upload there, and so if you want to listen on that platform, that is entirely viable. But I'm also tentatively considering adding extra content there, so if you want to go and subscribe there, you might find extra stuff. So anyways, I appreciate you being around, and yeah, I'll talk to you later. Bye.